Hi, my name's Arthur Driessen, and for the last year and a half, I've been traveling around America in my Tesla Model 3. I've been driving the long-range rear-wheel drive version that I got in late April of 2018, and I just put over 115,000 miles on it. Now that I've reached that milestone, I thought it would be beneficial if I sat down and talked to you guys about my thoughts on the car. And today we're going to be focusing on a couple things. I'm going to focus on the terrain and how it handled different types of it, how it handled all the different seasons, the range and battery degradation. We'll talk a little bit about the North American charging network. We'll take a second to talk about the service that I had to do to the car. I'm going to look at how much storage there actually is inside of the car. I'm going to look at Autopilot a little bit in depth and go on to navigate in Autopilot. And then I'm also going to do a little bit of what I don't like about the car. So without further ado, let's get to it. Okay, let's get into seasons and terrain. Being all over the country, I've seen tons of different types of terrain. You go off into the mountains, you go off into Native American reservations, and you're gonna see roads that really are supposed to have 4x4 vehicles. Probably my favorite thing to do is to go to a town, ask where the most difficult place is to get, and then when people tell me, oh, your car is not gonna be able to handle that, I go, okay, really, let's take it out and see. So I've really been pushing it to try to get to a bunch of places. I've taken it in sand, I've taken it through streams and creeks. It's really amazed me every time. When it comes to weather and seasons, the one thing you might wonder is how does it handle snow? Now, I've been in some pretty sticky situations with the snow, and it has happened to get me out of them every single time. Now, one thing I think you guys are all asking about is what is the type of service that I've done on the car over 115,000 miles. Now, I'm really excited to say that I've only had to get 2 control arms replaced, and I've had to get a piece in the door hinge replaced, and that literally is all the repairs. The control arms, all of them I would say are actually self-inflicted, because the control arms happened when I was going off-roading and on rough roads and through streams, and then the door hinge happened when I was at the Bonneville Salt Flats and wind was going 60 miles per hour. I opened it up and the wind just grabbed the door and smashed it open, and then I had to get a piece in the hinge replaced. But other than that, there's been absolutely nothing that I've had to get fixed. And I think that's pretty amazing over 115,000 miles. No oil changes, no nothing like that. I have had to get tires more than anything else. So my first set of tires only lasted 13,000 miles. When I was at 10,000 miles, I was on a road trip, and some guy at a supercharger came out to me and pointed out that my tires were practically bald, and it really surprised me because I only had 10,000 miles on the car. I called up Tesla, and they're like, actually, that's pretty normal, especially on the OEMs and with the instant torque and the heft of the battery. I wasn't sure if I believed them or not, so I put on some Pirellis, which had a tread tire warranty, and then my next set only lasted 20,000 miles. And even with proper rotations, my tires are lasting about 20 to 25,000 miles, which I guess is a little bit upsetting, but I drive it heavy, I drive it off-road, I drive it in different terrains, so really that's what can be expected. With the tread wear warranty from Pirelli, I'm able to save about 65% on my next set of tires, depending on how much I actually got out of each one, but I imagine as we integrate into the Teslas and electric cars a little bit more, those warranties might change a little bit, because right now, you know, they are really talking about the ICE vehicles, and we just so happen to be able to use the warranty. Other than that, though, the savings have been just phenomenal. And then you can factor in, you know, gas savings comparatively. You know, with supercharging, I average everything out at about 6 cents per mile, which means $6,000 over 100,000 miles. And you can take that number, and you can apply it to whatever car you would be driving or you would have chosen. If it was going to be a comparable car, you'd probably, you know, do a Mercedes 250, maybe an Audi A4 would be comparable. And I haven't driven any of those cars, so I don't know what the gas savings would be. I know with my Civic, just with gas. Now, we're just talking with gas, not with the price differential of how much, you know, more expensive a Tesla Model 3 is, but, you know, I saved probably about $10,000 on gas with the Civic. And of course, you know, that's living in Los Angeles, where the gas prices are expensive too. So, let's talk about battery range and degradation. So, you know, it's known that you are going to have some battery degradation throughout the life of the car. Your charging habits will change it. You should never charge up to 100%. I've only done it probably 10 times my entire 115,000 miles, and each time it was in a situation where I needed the complete battery. It was really cold out, and I was in the middle of nowhere without superchargers, and I needed to access that 310 miles, which actually would end up being about 270 miles with the cold. Or the different conditions. I have not lost much battery at all. I bought the car, it told me I had 310 miles. There's been a couple updates that have supposedly given me more range, but I never charged to 100% to test what range they said they would give me. And so I've always just kind of kept it at 310 as what I'm supposed to get. Some people will tell me, well, you should be getting 324. Whether you choose one or the other, the last time I charged 100%, which was a couple weeks ago, I still had 308 miles, that it said. And I think that's pretty good. I've heard that is better than the majority of people. Most people experience a high amount of degradation in the beginning, and then it kind of tapers off. I haven't really experienced any of that. I don't know why that is. I would say that it's probably because my charging habits. My charging habits, since I'm always on the road, are pretty good. I charge up between 30 and 70% most of the time. If there's another supercharger close enough I can get to without going above 70%, I don't go above 70%. Sometimes the computer will tell me that I'll be getting to a supercharger with only 10% left, and I'll go and I'll see if there's one closer that I can make it. And I'll choose that instead. And I've found that keeping it in that range has made my battery last. It's all anecdotal. I can't tell you if that's why, but like I said, I still have 308, and that's fantastic, so I'm not complaining at all. The charging infrastructure throughout the Americas is really, really good. Through the majority of the states, I haven't had any issue at all. The only issues come when I get into more obscure areas like the borders. When I went down to Texas Big Bend, there weren't any superchargers, and I had to hypermile it to get back. I could have paid an RV park to sit and do a slow charge. When I was up in northern Minnesota along the Canadian border and northern Montana along the Canadian border, I had to slow charge. Both were near national parks. And then in North Dakota, there aren't any chargers, and I had to slow charge at hotels. If there aren't any chargers that the computer can give you, you can always go on PlugShare, and that's how you find the slow ones. You can also find some CHAdeMOs, but you'll need a CHAdeMO adapter for that. But with the combination of all of those, I've been able to travel and I've never run out of battery. I've gotten to 0%, I've gotten to 1%, I've gotten to 3%. I've had to hypermile it a bunch of times in the cold, but I've never run out. And I know that the biggest fear for people is running out of battery. And so I hope that this gives you a little bit of confidence when you're traveling. So let's get into Autopilot. Autopilot is the reason why I bought the car. I know a lot of people have their opinions on, the environmental aspects of the Tesla and stuff like that, but really my pushing point was this tech that would allow me not to drive. And I'm being a little bit hyperbolic here, but not quite so much when I say that Autopilot really changed my life. It works almost flawlessly on highways. You still have to pay attention for cross traffic if it's not a closed lane highway, and you have to pay attention for emergency vehicles because there have been multiple times where I'll just be hanging out and it's in autopilot, and then all of a sudden there's police dealing with an accident on the side of the road and I have to disengage so I can swerve out of the way for it. So you still have to pay attention, but on the highways it works almost flawlessly. On the highways you also get Navigate on Autopilot. Now when we first got it, it wasn't all that great. It didn't really change lanes that well. It would be finicky when it would decide to, but over the last couple months and over the updates, it's gotten exponentially better. We're at the point now where it drives almost as seamlessly as a regular driver. However, some of the few things that I don't like about the car happen when Navigate on Autopilot is engaged. I won't talk about those here. We'll save that for the end when I'm talking about the stuff I don't like. Now we also have City Street Autopilot. This is where the technology doesn't work quite as well. It's not yet designed for the city streets, and Tesla will tell you that when you go to the orientation, which if you buy a Tesla, I hope you stick around and go to the orientation because you'll learn a lot there. It doesn't recognize stoplights, it doesn't recognize street signs, and also it recognizes other cars and pedestrians and stuff. You can see them in the visualization, but it's not yet designed to be moving out of the way for them. So you really have to pay attention. I don't use Autopilot on city streets that often. I try to stick with the highway, and I feel that that is a lot safer. Within the upcoming months, they're doing Hardware 3 retrofits, and all new cars have the Hardware 3, and then they'll be able to start making the Navigate on city streets a little bit more possible. Until then, though, I recommend using it mostly on the highways. One thing I did want to point out was how crazy of curves Autopilot can take sometimes. If you see here, we're at Rocky Mountain National Park, and this is a 180-degree curve that we took, and I was absolutely amazed when we took it. And then right over here, I wanted to show you this 90-degree curve that I was able to take right behind Cedar Point in Ohio. The roads weren't that good, the lines were marked well, but still, going 90 degrees, I was a little bit worried, and it handled it like a champ. One thing I think a lot of people wonder about is how much storage is actually in the Model 3. By looking at it, you might think it's your average car size, so really not too much. But while I've been traveling with it, I've found that you can fit in a lot more than you think. Right now I have it fully loaded, and I'm going to empty it out for you.
I ain't never felt so comfortable, like a rain without a thunderstorm. Power rain until you never get emotional. But mama, you got me so comfortable. Yeah.
Wow, so there you have it, an absolutely giant, enormous amount of stuff inside the car. But as Elon always says, there's always one more thing. Okay, so there we have it. You can fit all this stuff inside your Model 3 without any worries. And now for the part that you've all been waiting for, what I don't like about the car. I'm going to be focusing on primarily 3 things. I'll talk about the issues I have with Navigate on Autopilot, the issues I have with Smart Summit, and the issues I have with the navigation system when it's not connected to the internet. Now, all of these are software-related issues, so they could be easily fixed with an over-the-air update, and hopefully they will at some point. Mechanically speaking, I think the car is amazing. If you look at the rest of the review, I don't think there's really much I can say bad about it, but there are some software limitations that I would like to talk about. Let's start with Navigate on Autopilot. So right here, we're getting into the left lane to pass this guy, which is all fine and dandy, but we have an exit coming up pretty soon, and you would think Navigate on Autopilot would be able to plan for this, but it doesn't. So it passes this guy, but then it immediately needs to get right back into the right lane. So it has to slam on its brakes to get behind this guy to be able to make the exit, therefore just, cutting off the guy that you just passed and slamming your brakes on. It's not the best etiquette. And then if you notice, it says Navigate on Autopilot is about to end, which is on mid-highway, which is interesting, and it's about to end right before the exit. So if you see here, it ends, and then I have to take the exit myself. And so when stuff like this happens and you're not paying attention, it can be, or at least not paying attention to the map, it can be a little bit frustrating. Okay. So now here, we're getting into the left lane, and I don't really know why we're getting into the left lane. And so now we're the slow car in the left lane, and that is just not the best etiquette, and I would assume that Navigate on Autopilot would be able to do a little bit better, because now you're blocking traffic in the left lane, and everyone has to pass you on the right, which really we're not supposed to be doing. Okay. And here you'll see again that we get into the left lane, and I don't really understand why, again, that we're getting to the left lane. Maybe it's because it thinks that the right lane is going to exit, even though both the left and the right lane are going to continue going straight, even though the exit forks. This is a pretty consistent problem with Navigate on Autopilot. And then you just end up sitting in the left lane. And since I have my speed usually set at the speed limit or 5 above, then I'm the slow car, and it's not very fun being the slow car in the left lane. And here we get into the left lane to pass these cars, but just like before, we had an exit coming up pretty soon. And so you see, instead of passing this slow car, it slams on its brakes to get behind the bus, and then it just sits behind the bus going 45 miles per hour. And if Navigate on Autopilot was really as far along as we thought it was, I would think that we would be able to avoid situations like this. And if you see here, we get into the right lane to take an exit, but really we want to take the next exit. So Autopilot gets in the lane and exit too early, and then gets off at the wrong exit and reroutes itself. And it's not that big of a deal, but you would think that with the visual systems and the geocoding that we have in the computer, we would be able to avoid problems like this. And especially with full self-driving coming up, we need to figure out ways to fix this. And now let's talk about my issues with Smart Summon. Smart Summon probably shouldn't have been released, in my opinion. I think it was a rushed piece of software, and until Hardware 3 came out, it should have just stayed unreleased. I know that a lot of people say, hey, it's in beta, but I like functionality over coolness, and I much rather would have waited for a fully working piece of software that I would like to use every day, opposed to something that's just cool to show my friends and essentially a party trick. So before I filmed this today, I went out to 3 random parking lots, and I just set up my camera and decided to try to Smart Summon. And so we're gonna go over the results right now. Okay, here's the first parking lot that I tried Smart Summon in, and it was off screen, but I had been holding down the come to me button, and I'm still holding it down, and absolutely nothing is happening. And so, it would have been way faster to just go and walk to the car, but let's give this a sec while the lady walks past, and then we'll try it one more time. Okay, she walks past the car, and here we go. You can see that it's activating a little bit, it's starting to come forward, but it's really pretty slow, and it's having to readjust itself just to pull straight ahead, which doesn't really make too much sense to me. but then as it comes out, it starts to come out, and it's a lot slower than I would think is useful. But it starts to get a little bit faster, and okay, here we go, it's pulling up. I think this would be pretty cool, except it just pulls straight into the middle of the street and stops right there. And sits there, blocking traffic. Okay, here's parking lot number 2. We've got another random parking lot. You see I'm parked there over on the right. And we start to back up. And it stops. And just slowly backs up. Doesn't seem like it knows what it wants to do. Yeah, and it's just slow as molasses. Okay, there we go, we're finally out the spot. And then it seems like it backs up into another parking spot to make its readjustments, which doesn't make sense to me. And it starts pulling forward, okay. It puts its right blinker on, so it's gonna turn towards us. Nope, it just stops. And it sits there. And that's it. I have to go run to the car then. Okay, we'll do our third and final attempt, and this is a completely empty parking lot, so I hoped that it wouldn't have any issues. So we activate Smart Summon there, and it starts to back up. And okay, we're doing okay, but then it just kind of stops. And it sits there for a sec, thinking, okay, it's backing up again. And again, it would have been a lot faster to walk up with the car, and I think the speed is one of the biggest things that needs improvement. And finally it pulls forward, and it comes and parks in front of me. So this is the closest to a successful attempt that I had out of the 3 attempts. And this is generally about as successful as I can expect it to be. And the last thing I'd like to talk about is my issues with the car navigation system when it's not connected to the internet. This is really kind of an edge case because, especially since they use AT&T, even though the service might not be great, you can generally get service in the majority of the United States. But there are some places where you'll go dead, maybe in the middle of Maine, in the middle of the Colorado Rockies, up in Montana. When you're traveling, this stuff does happen. And I don't have any video to show about it, so I'll just talk about it real quick. When you're not connected to the internet, the navigation system essentially shuts down. You can only go in and put things in directly by touch waypoint. And, that's not very beneficial when you don't have service and you don't know where you're going. You might have an address, but you try to put the address in and it says not enough information, please put in full address. And even though you've put in the full address, it still won't find it. Traditionally cars have a DVD database system in the computer which they access to solve problems like this. And it seems like the Tesla has everything stored online, which causes these issues. This is a simple fix, really. It might take up a little bit of computer space on the hard drive, but I think it's well worth it. And then also, it could be fixed easily by Starlink once that's all up. But, that's the future, so we won't talk about that until that comes around. One other thing that I'd like to say about navigation really quickly is the lack of waypoints. Elon was asked earlier on Twitter recently if there were going to be waypoints, and he said no. And I really don't understand why. When you're traveling and you have a certain amount of battery and you have a certain amount of stops that you want to make, you want to be able to put those stops in and make sure you can get to the charger with enough battery after going to all of them. And if not, have it route you on the way, opposed to just one after the other, because theoretically you can be going had, say, 5 stops, and you get to your 3rd one and you don't have enough battery to make it to the 4th, and you'll have to go way out of your way to go to a supercharger, and it would just be a lot easier if you could route it. I like to make the joke that on my Windows 2000 Gateway PC, I was able to log on to Netscape, go on MapQuest, and put in a location and use waypoints. I don't understand why the Tesla doesn't have them, but like I said earlier, this is an easy thing that can be solved over and over there update, so I hope it's going to happen at some point. Well, I guess that's it for my 115,000 mile Tesla Model 3 overview. Now there's a lot more I could talk about. I could sit and talk about my Tesla all day, and you know, there's a lot of things that I didn't get into, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comment section or shoot me an email, and I hope that this has given you a little bit more information on what to expect out of the car after 115,000 miles.